Hello and welcome back. Today on Patriot Thinkology, we are talking through my top 10 books. Now, over the past year, or actually about 2 years, I've read like 60 different books on all sorts of topics. So it's changed my life completely, and I wanted to bring to attention just my top 10 overall books. And I'm going to say in advance, the Bible is not on the list because I don't consider the Bible as a book that I rate. It's definitely above everything else. So these will not be including the Bible because it's high and well above them. But that being said, I'm going to be counting down from 10 all the way down to my number one pick for my favorite book and the one that's changed my life the most. Let's get started. So the number 10 position, and by the way, these are all phenomenal books, highly recommend them. But number 10 position, Frederick Eklund and The Cell. So this book is a very interesting book. It covers the life of Frederick Eklund, not a Christian, but phenomenal in the sales department of New York. And what he does is he goes around and he sells real estate. And it shows how he got into the real estate market and how he became the number one salesperson in New York. Really, really cool. One of the emphasis points on this book is just being comfortable with who you are, being yourself at all times, because that means that you're a real person when you're going to sell something. And people detect if a fake person's trying to sell them something. So critical point from this book. Love this book. And by the way, I'm not sponsored by any of these authors. So great book right here. Next up on the list, The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. This book is a really interesting book because it goes through the hypothetical situation of a person living in Babylon and trying to understand how to make money. And they go into these different areas, and one of them is the center of learning and knowledge. And they ask different hypothetical questions, and then they answer them with different examples. And it's just super, super cool. Almost like a story as opposed to an actual like economics book. So highly recommend The Richest Man in Babylon. Next up on the list, Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. Eat That Frog is a great book on just getting over procrastination, and it helped me out a lot in that regard because if you're going to do something hard, you might as well do it first and get it out of the way. So that's why it's called Eat That Frog. Great book, helps a lot with getting over procrastination. So that's in my number 8 spot here on the list. So moving along, coming in at the number 7 spot, we have Freakonomics. The rogue economist explores the hidden side of everything. Stephen Levitt and Stephen Durbin. Phenomenal book in the regards that it just shows the connection between issues that you wouldn't think were related to each other, but are definitely related to each other. Just statistics and stuff that nobody else is afraid to show. And in that regard, it really opens my mind to look for things that just wouldn't otherwise be apparent. Like, if you put up a traffic light in one area, how would it affect crime in another area? Stuff like that. How do the economics of like a drug dealer work? Just very, very fascinating book that gives you a perspective that you otherwise don't see. So really cool, interesting perspective here. Next up, moving into the number 6 spot here on the list, it is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. It's going to sound funny, but the number one thing I took from this is that he did dancing in a third world country and ended up placing on like a national level or something. It was really, really interesting. But the point of the book is actually to show how like you've got a difference in economic value. So like the dollar's high in US can buy only so much goods. If you take that same dollar to like a third world country, you can buy like 10 times as much. So you can make a small amount of money in the US and have a big amount of money in another country by using currency exchange rates. So very fascinating book in that regards. Fascinating lifestyle, just being able to tour the world, see everything. It's like just so neat to see that kind of a perspective. So I've been thinking about this book a lot recently and just trying to figure out how to apply it, because it's one thing to like read it and it's another one to actually figure out how to live this particular book. So I've already mentioned this book before, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Wilkins and Leif Bevan. Great book. It's by 2 Navy SEALs, and it talks about how you have to take ownership of every single decision you make, and also the ownership of all your subordinates and the team that's under you. So great book for leaders out there, for people who are going into a leadership position. Highly recommend this. It just it's changed me in regards that I don't try to shy away from my bad decisions anymore. I just take complete ownership of them. I try to fix them, and I try to move on. I don't try to put those off to the side like I used to. So great book in that regards. Highly recommend it. Finally, coming in, we're in my top 5 now. How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton M. Christensen. This book is great to give you perspective on life. And I'm going to say that again. It's an absolute great book because it really points towards what's actually important. For example, in this book, there's an example of a person who's making like over 100 grand, and they're saying, how do we motivate this person? And they're like, well, pay him more money. Well, the guy's already got a ton of money, and he's working like 80 hours, so he can't really do more with that money. But having a day off or something means a lot because he can spend more time with his family. So it puts into perspective what actually motivates a person to live a happy life. And like, your job will never satisfy you as far as living happiness if you're not spending time with your family. So you really have to understand what makes you happy, what makes life worth living. And this book is phenomenal in that regards. It's also by a Christian author, which is as a nice perspective on that as well. So again, that's How Will You Measure Your Life? Great book. Highly recommend it. Moving along here. This one's been around a while, but I hadn't actually read it. It is Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And it's by John Gray, PhD. This book has got to be one of the most interesting books I've ever read because I'd never read a book that actually talks about the differences between men and women before. And I also didn't know that the phrase man cave came from this book because it talks about how the man, the Martian, goes into his cave to consult issues, whereas the woman goes out to her different friends and talks about the issues there. It just talks about the different ways that we handle stress, how we can do things to better talk to the other person and just overcome issues. And great book, highly recommend it. Definitely a relationship book here. Really works well for understanding how people think who are not like you. So, Men Are From Mars, Women Are For Venus takes the 3rd spot on my list. We're coming into the top 2 now. What will it be? So, second on my list to the top, it is The 1 Minute Millionaire. Now, I don't know if a lot of you out there have heard of this book before because it's not really on a lot of the top 10 lists, but I think it should be. This book is absolutely phenomenal. I love it. It changed my life. This book right here is probably the #1 reason that I got into all the other books that I got into over the past 2 summers. And the reason for that is because it approaches economics from a way I'd never seen before. So if you open up this book, on this side of the page here, it tells just economic facts, ways you can implement stuff. Sometimes it gives statistics and equations. On the other side, however, it tells the story of a young woman who's trying to save her kids from being taken away from her because she can't physically pay for the money to feed them. So it tells her story of how she has to make $1 million to basically save her kids. Phenomenal book, illustrates all the critical points of real estate, of economics, in a story form and in a physical form, and I've never seen that before, so great book. In some regards, you could say, in the story format, it's similar to Richest Man in Babylon. So after you read this book, if you want more story formatted, you can go to The Richest Man in Babylon. If you want more like economic formatted, let's see here, I would probably mention going to like Rich Dad, Poor Dad or something along those lines. So, moving along here, in the top position, those of you that know me know exactly which book I'm going to pull out here. Those of you that do not probably won't. It is The Art of War. I cannot tell you how long this book has been at the #1 spot on all of my lists. #1, because it's super short. Look at that. It's not a long book at all. If you were listening to this, I think it's like maybe like a couple of hours to go through the entire book. #2, this book is so cross-compatible. You can apply this book to your personal lives, to your business environment. You can also apply it to your debate strategy, which is where I first came across it. And you can also apply it, as the name says, to the art of war. Now, it's by the hypothetical or real person Sun Tzu, and it goes through different strategies for how you approach situations in battle. For example, one of the famous things from that is the movement like water. You need to move like water. Do not attack the strong spots, attack the weak spots. Just like water moves to the weakest point in a dam and goes through, that's how you go. And the same is true in like corporate strategy. For example, your opponent may sell a fantastic resistor. Don't try to compete with them in the resistor market. Maybe their circuit boards aren't as good. Go over to the circuit board market, take them out there, and then you'll eventually be able to buy out the resistor market. So fantastic book there, just regards to strategy in general. I hope you enjoyed this. This has been my top 10 countdown of the books that have definitely most influenced me over the last 2 years. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, and I'll see all of you in the next episode. Have a fantastic day.